Ana Hernandez stood before the towering glass building in downtown Chicago, clutching her leather portfolio close to her chest. The morning sun reflected off the windows of Preston and Williams law firm, making the building shine like a beacon of hope. At 42 years old, with her dark hair neatly pulled back and wearing her most professional navy blue suit, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had earned this opportunity. Back in Mexico City, Ana had been a senior paralegal at one of the most prestigious international law firms. For 15 years, she had handled complex corporate cases and earned a reputation for her sharp mind and attention to detail. But here in Chicago, she was starting over, taking a position that was technically a step down from her previous role. Better to build new foundations than to regret not trying, she whispered to herself, remembering her father's words. He had always encouraged her to chase her dreams, even when they seemed impossible. Moving to the United States had been her dream since she was a young girl, watching American legal dramas on television. The security guard smiled warmly as Ana showed her new employee badge. "First day, Ms. Hernandez. Welcome to Preston and Williams." His kind greeting helped calm her nerves slightly as she made her way to the elevator. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of the building. Ana's desk was on the 28th floor, where most of the paralegals and junior lawyers worked. As she stepped out of the elevator, she was greeted by Sarah Chen, the HR coordinator who had handled her hiring process. "Ana, right on time," Sarah said, walking over to welcome her. "Let me show you to your desk, and then we have the morning team meeting in 15 minutes. It's perfect timing. You'll get to meet everyone at once." Ana's desk was neat and modern, with a new computer and a small welcome plant. She barely had time to set down her things before Sarah was guiding her to the large conference room. Through the glass walls, Ana could see about 20 people already gathered inside. The conference room fell quiet as Sarah opened the door. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet our new senior paralegal, Ana Hernandez. She's joining us from Mexico City and brings 15 years of experience in international corporate law." Ana smiled confidently at her new colleagues. "Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to join the Preston and Williams team." She spoke clearly, her words carrying the melodic accent of her native Spanish. That's when she first noticed it, the slight smirk exchanged between 2 of the senior lawyers sitting at the head of the table. James Preston Jr., the founding partner's son, leaned over to whisper something to Victoria Cole, another senior partner. Victoria covered her mouth to hide a laugh. The team meeting proceeded with various case updates and assignments. When it was Ana's turn to introduce herself in more detail, she spoke about her experience handling major corporate mergers in Latin America. She was in the middle of describing a particularly complex case when James Preston Jr. interrupted her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern, "but could you speak more clearly? Some of us are having trouble understanding your unique way of speaking." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Ana felt her cheeks warm slightly, but she kept her composure. She had dealt with prejudice before and knew better than to let it show that the comment had affected her. "Of course," she replied professionally, continuing her introduction without missing a beat. She didn't miss Victoria Cole's exaggerated eye roll or the way she mouthed accent to another lawyer with raised eyebrows. After the meeting, several junior staff members came to welcome Ana personally. Maria Rodriguez, another paralegal, touched her arm gently. "Your English is perfectly clear," she whispered. "Don't let them get to you. They're like this with everyone who isn't. Well, you know." Back at her desk, Hannah opened her notebook and made her first entry of the day, carefully noting down the incident in the meeting, including the time, date, and names of those involved. Her mother had always taught her to document everything, and her years in law had reinforced that lesson. As she typed her login credentials into her new computer, Anna's determination grew stronger. She hadn't worked 15 years in one of Mexico City's top law firms to be belittled here. If James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole thought they could shame her into submission, they had seriously underestimated her. "Let the games begin," she murmured to herself as she started organizing her desk, already planning her next moves carefully. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been made to feel less than because of their accent or background. And Ana Hernandez was ready for the challenge. 2 weeks into her new job at Preston and Williams, Ana could feel the tension growing. What had started as subtle mockery in the first team meeting had evolved into something more direct and cruel. She sat at her desk, reviewing international contracts, when she heard the now familiar sound of Victoria Cole's exaggerated fake accent floating down the hallway. "Oh, Senor client, you must understand Z papers," Victoria was saying, drawing laughs from several junior associates. She was clearly mimicking Anna's presentation from earlier that morning. James Preston Jr. stood beside her, grinning and adding his own poor imitation of Anna's accent. Maria Rodriguez, who sat in the cubicle next to Anna, shot her a sympathetic look. "They're acting like children," she whispered. "And they're supposed to be senior partners." Anna kept her eyes on her computer screen, but her fingers had stopped typing. She reached for her notebook, the one where she documented every incident, and made another entry. Date, time, location, witnesses present. She was building her case, piece by piece. Later that afternoon, Anna was called into a case prep meeting. A major client from Spain was coming next week, and the firm needed to prepare their presentation. As the only team member with extensive international experience, Anna should have been leading the preparation. Instead, she found herself being assigned to make copies and organize files. "We need someone to handle the simpler tasks," James Preston Jr. said with a smirk. "We wouldn't want to confuse the client with any communication issues." He exchanged knowing looks with Victoria. What they didn't know was that Anna had already handled 3 similar cases back in Mexico City, cases even bigger than this one. She also spoke 4 languages fluently and had maintained a perfect record in client relations. But here she was, being treated like an inexperienced intern. The next day, things got worse. Anna was preparing coffee in the break room when she overheard Victoria and James recording themselves on their phones. "Oh, Senor Preston," Victoria said in her mocking accent, "I have 15 years of experience making copies." They both burst into laughter. No, it's more like this," James replied, making his voice higher. "Senor Preston, I can't understand why you don't respect my vast experience." Anna's hand shook slightly as she poured her coffee, but she kept her face neutral. She took out her phone and quietly recorded their mockery, adding it to her growing collection of evidence. Back at her desk, Anna opened her email to find a message that made her blood boil. Someone had forwarded her an internal email chain where Victoria and James had shared their accent recordings with other senior staff members. Some had responded with laughing emojis. Others had added their own mocking impressions. What they hadn't noticed was that they'd accidentally copied one of their Spanish clients on the email thread. Anna's phone rang. It was Carmen Santos, her old colleague from Mexico City. "Anna, you won't believe what I just heard," Carmen said. "The Martinez Group is considering pulling their business from Preston and Williams. Something about cultural insensitivity?" Anna sat up straighter. The Martinez Group was one of the firm's biggest international clients. She had worked with them extensively in Mexico City, though James and Victoria didn't know this. That afternoon, Anna was copying files when she overheard James and Victoria in a heated discussion with the managing partner, Richard Williams. "What do you mean they're considering leaving?" James was saying. "The Martinez Group has been our client for 10 years. Apparently, Richard replied, his voice stern, "They're concerned about our firm's ability to handle international clients with cultural sensitivity. Would either of you know anything about that?" Anna could hear Victoria stammering out excuses, but she kept working quietly. 3 more international clients had contacted the firm with similar concerns. The mock recordings had spread further than James and Victoria had intended. As Anna walked back to her desk, she noticed something different. The junior associates who had laughed at James and Victoria's jokes were now avoiding eye contact with them. Sarah from HR was having whispered conversations with various staff members. The tide was beginning to turn. That evening, as Anna packed up her things, she received an email from Richard Williams himself. "Ms. Hernandez, please join me in my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We need to discuss some concerning matters that have come to my attention." Anna smiled slightly as she shut down her computer. She patted her notebook, filled with dated entries, recordings, and email evidence. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole were about to learn that underestimating Anna Hernandez had been their biggest mistake. The morning of the big client meeting arrived with tension hanging heavy in the air. Anna sat in the conference room, her presentation materials neatly arranged before her. The Martinez Group, one of Spain's largest real estate developers, was due to arrive any minute. Despite being the most qualified person to handle this presentation, she had been relegated to a supporting role by James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole. The clients entered. Carlos Martinez, CEO of the Martinez Group, followed by his legal team. Anna's heart skipped a beat when she recognized him. 3 years ago in Mexico City, she had helped his company navigate a complex merger. But before she could say anything, James Preston Jr. stepped forward. "Welcome, Mr. Martinez," James said loudly and slowly, as if speaking to a child. "We are so pleased to have you here today." He gestured to the seats with an exaggerated wave. Carlos Martinez raised an eyebrow at the condescending tone but took his seat. His eyes widened with recognition when he saw Anna, but she gave him a subtle shake of her head. She wanted to see how this would play out. The meeting began with Victoria Cole's presentation. She spoke in an unnecessarily slow and loud voice, occasionally glancing at Anna with a smirk. "We want to make sure everyone in the room can understand clearly," she said pointedly. When it was Anna's turn to present the international tax implications, she had barely spoken 3 sentences when James interrupted her. "Perhaps I should translate what Ms. Hernandez is trying to say," he said, standing up. "Her accent can be quite challenging." He chuckled, expecting the clients to join in his amusement. Instead, Carlos Martinez's face darkened. He raised his hand to stop James mid-sentence. "Señor Preston," he said, his voice cold, "are you suggesting that I, a Spanish businessman, cannot understand Ms. Hernandez's perfect English?" The room fell silent. James's smile froze on his face. "Because," Carlos continued, "not only do I understand her perfectly, but I also remember working with her in Mexico City. Ms. Hernandez handled one of our largest mergers 3 years ago, a billion-dollar deal that she executed flawlessly." Victoria Cole's face paled. She shuffled through her papers, avoiding eye contact. In fact, Carlos stood up, his voice carrying authority. "I'm quite surprised to see her in such a junior role here. In Mexico City, she was handling our most complex international cases. Are you telling me that Preston and Williams hired someone with her expertise to make copies and be mocked for her accent?" James tried to recover. "Mr. Martinez, I assure you there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Carlos cut him off, "is your firm's apparent belief that an accent equals incompetence. I've received some interesting emails recently, recordings of your staff mocking Spanish accents. Is this how Preston and Williams treats its international clients as well?" The conference room door opened, and Richard Williams, the managing partner, walked in. His face was grave. "Mr. Martinez, I apologize for being late. I'd just finished reviewing some disturbing evidence of workplace harassment that was brought to my attention." Anna sat quietly, maintaining her professional composure as the scene unfolded. She watched James and Victoria squirm in their seats as Richard Williams continued. "It seems," Richard said, "that we have failed not only our employees but also our clients. Mr. Martinez, I understand if you wish to take your business elsewhere, but I hope you'll give us a chance to make things right." He turned to Anna. "Ms. Hernandez, would you be willing to take the lead on the Martinez Group account? Clearly, your history with them and your expertise make you the best person for the job." Before Anna could respond, Carlos Martinez spoke up. "If Ms. Hernandez is put in charge, we might consider staying with your firm. But first," he turned to James and Victoria, "I want to hear your explanation for the recordings that were circulated." James and Victoria sat frozen, their faces red with embarrassment. The same people who had laughed at their jokes yesterday were now watching them with disapproval. "Perhaps," Anna finally spoke, her voice clear and confident, "this is an opportunity for Preston and Williams to show its true commitment to international clients and workplace dignity." She opened her notebook, filled with documented incidents. "I have some suggestions for moving forward." As she began outlining her proposals for change, Anna could see James and Victoria's professional facades crumbling. Their cruel jokes and mockery had finally caught up with them, and in the most devastating way possible, in front of a major client who knew exactly who Anna was and what she was capable of. The tables had turned, and everyone in that conference room knew it. The aftermath of the Martinez Group meeting sent shockwaves through Preston and Williams. Anna sat in Richard Williams's office the next morning, watching as he reviewed the extensive evidence she had gathered over the past weeks. Her notebook lay open on his desk, along with printed emails and audio recordings. "Ms. Hernandez," Richard said, removing his glasses with a tired sigh, "I owe you an apology. This should never have happened in our firm." He looked at a particular email thread where James and Victoria had shared their mocking recordings. "But it gets worse, doesn't it?" Anna nodded and pulled out additional documents. 3 other international clients besides the Martinez Group have raised concerns about cultural insensitivity. The Torres Corporation from Mexico, Singapore's Lee Enterprises, and Brazilian firm Verde Industries all have threatened to take their business elsewhere. Richard's face grew increasingly concerned as he calculated the potential losses. These 4 clients represented nearly 30% of the firm's international business portfolio. "There's more," Anna continued, her voice steady. After yesterday's meeting, several junior staff members came forward with their own experiences. She handed him another folder. Maria Rodriguez, Kevin Chen, and Aiza Patel all have documented incidents of discrimination. They were afraid to speak up until now. The managing partner rubbed his temples. Just then, Sarah from HR knocked and entered the office, carrying her own stack of papers. "The preliminary investigation confirms everything Ms. Hernandez reported," Sarah said. "We've also discovered that James and Victoria have been deliberately sidelining qualified minority staff from major cases. The pattern goes back at least 2 years." Richard stood up and walked to his office window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. "Ms. Hernandez, you could have taken this evidence straight to a lawyer outside our firm. Filed a discrimination lawsuit. Why didn't you?" Anna straightened in her chair. "Because, Mr. Williams, I believe in fixing problems, not just punishing people. Your firm has a strong reputation in corporate law, but in today's global market, international expertise and cultural competency aren't optional. They're essential." The intercom buzzed, interrupting their conversation. "Mr. Williams," his secretary's voice came through. "Carlos Martinez is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Richard took the call on speakerphone. Carlos's voice filled the room. "Richard, I've spoken with the other international clients who received those unfortunate email recordings. We've made a decision." The room grew tense as they waited for what seemed like a death sentence for the firm's international practice. "We will maintain our relationships with Preston and Williams on one condition," Carlos continued. "Ms. Hernandez must be promoted to head of international client relations with full partner track status. We trust her expertise and integrity." Richard looked at Anna, his eyes wide with surprise and relief. "Mr. Martinez, I think we can definitely discuss that arrangement." "Excellent," Carlos replied. "Oh, and Richard? Those sensitivity training programs Anna suggested? Make them happen. We'll be watching the firm's progress closely." After the call ended, Richard turned to Anna. "It seems you've managed to save our international practice instead of destroying it. That's unexpected." "Mr. Williams," Anna replied with a small smile, "success isn't about destroying competition or tearing others down. It's about building something better." Just then, shouting could be heard from the hallway. James Preston Jr.'s voice carried through the door. "This is ridiculous. You can't suspend us. Do you know who my father is?" Sarah quietly slipped out to handle the situation, leaving Anna and Richard to continue their discussion. "Your new office will be ready tomorrow," Richard said, having made his decision. "I'd like you to start implementing those changes you proposed immediately. And about James and Victoria. They need consequences." Anna finished his thought. "But they'd also need a chance to learn and improve. Maybe starting with those sensitivity training sessions they once mocked." Richard nodded, impressed by her balanced approach. As Anna left his office, she saw Victoria Cole being escorted to HR, her usual confidence replaced by visible worry. James Preston Jr. stood by his office, frantically calling his father. Maria Rodriguez caught up with Anna near the elevators. "Is it true?" she whispered excitedly. "Are you really going to be head of international relations?" Anna smiled and pressed the elevator button. "It's true. And my first order of business is making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else here again." As the elevator doors closed, Anna caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal. She stood straighter, stronger. The accent that James and Victoria had mocked would now be one of the firm's most valuable assets in the global market. Sometimes, she thought, the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's success. 1 week into her new position as head of international relations, Anna sat in her corner office on the 29th floor, reviewing the changes taking place at Preston and Williams. The view of Chicago's skyline through her window was a constant reminder of how far she'd come from those first difficult weeks. The door opened, and Sarah from HR entered with a thick folder. "The disciplinary hearing for James and Victoria is scheduled for tomorrow," she said, placing the folder on Anna's desk. "They both requested that you speak on their behalf." Anna raised an eyebrow in surprise. Just 3 weeks ago, these same people had been mocking her accent in the break room. Now they wanted her support? "There's something else," Sarah continued, pulling out another document. "We've been contacted by the State Bar Association. They're launching their own investigation into discriminatory practices. Apparently, someone sent them the recordings." Anna leaned back in her chair, thinking about how quickly things had changed. The morning had started with a video call with the Martinez Group, where she'd successfully negotiated an expansion of their business relationship. The same international experience that James and Victoria had dismissed was now bringing millions in new revenue to the firm. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Victoria Cole, looking very different from her usual polished self. Her eyes were red, and she clutched a tissue in her hand. "May I come in?" Victoria asked quietly, her voice lacking its usual arrogance. Anna gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sarah excused herself, closing the door behind her. "Anna, Ms. Hernandez," Victoria began, stumbling over her words. "I know I don't deserve your help, but my career is on the line. The Bar Association, they could suspend my license." Anna remained silent, letting Victoria continue. "I've been thinking about why I behaved the way I did," Victoria's voice cracked. "The truth is, when I heard you speak in that first meeting, so confident, so knowledgeable about international law, I felt threatened. Instead of seeing you as an asset to our team, I saw you as competition." Tears began rolling down Victoria's cheeks. "My mother, she was an immigrant too. She had an accent just like yours. I spent my whole childhood being embarrassed by it, trying." Anna added one final note to her notebook. Day 25, the beginning of change. Tomorrow's hearing would be difficult, but it would also be a turning point, not just for James and Victoria, but for Preston and Williams as a whole. The disciplinary hearing room was packed with Preston and Williams staff members. Anna sat in the front row, watching as James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole faced the committee. The State Bar Association representatives sat at one end of the long table, their faces stern as they reviewed the evidence. Richard Williams presented the firm's internal investigation findings first. The recordings of James and Victoria mocking Anna's accent played through the room's speakers, making several people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Victoria kept her eyes down, while James gripped the edge of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "These recordings," the lead bar investigator said, "show a pattern of discriminatory behavior that goes against everything our profession stands for. Mr. Preston, Miss Cole, do you understand that you could lose your licenses over this?" Before either could respond, Anna stood up. All eyes turned to her as she walked to the podium. She placed her familiar notebook on the surface, its pages now filled with not just incidents of discrimination, but also her plan for change. "If I may," she began, her accented English clear and confident, "I'd like to share my recommendations for this case." The committee nodded, and Anna continued. "What happened at Preston and Williams isn't just about two lawyers mocking an accent. It's about a broader culture that needed to change. And now, we have an opportunity to make that change meaningful." She outlined her proposal. Instead of losing their licenses, James and Victoria would take a 6-month leave of absence. During this time, they would work with immigrant advocacy groups, complete cultural sensitivity training, and help develop new diversity guidelines for law firms. "Punishment alone doesn't create change," Anna explained. "Education does, understanding does, and sometimes people need to face their own prejudices to grow beyond them." Victoria raised her head, tears streaming down her face. "Ms. Hernandez is right," she said, standing up. "I didn't just mock an accent, I mocked everything my own mother went through as an immigrant. I forgot my own family's struggle in my rush to fit in with what I thought a successful lawyer should sound like. James stood next as well. My father built this firm, he said, his voice shaking. But instead of honoring his work, I nearly destroyed our international practice because of my prejudice. I deserve whatever punishment the committee decides, but I want to do more than just accept punishment. I want to make things right. The Bar Association committee members huddled together, discussing in low voices. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, they announced their decision. They accepted Anna's proposal, with additional requirements. James and Victoria would need to make public apologies, attend weekly counseling sessions, and work under Anna's supervision upon their return. Any further discriminatory behavior would result in immediate license suspension. As the hearing room cleared out, Maria Rodriguez approached Anna. "You're too kind to them," she said. "After what they did, they deserve to lose their licenses." Anna shook her head. "Sometimes the hardest punishment is having to face yourself and change. Besides," she smiled, "they're about to spend 6 months learning to pronounce names in 12 different languages. That's punishment enough." Later that afternoon, Anna received an unexpected visitor in her office. James Preston Sr., the firm's founding partner. The elderly lawyer looked tired but determined. "Ms. Hernandez," he said, settling into a chair, "I came back from retirement to tell you something. 40 years ago, when I started this firm, my partner was a Jewish lawyer who had escaped Europe. He had a thick accent, and other lawyers mocked him constantly. We built this firm to be different, to be better." He paused, emotion clear in his voice. "Somewhere along the way, we lost that vision. My own son forgot it. But you reminded us what this firm was meant to be." Anna listened as the old lawyer continued. "I want you to help rebuild what we lost. The firm needs a new managing partner who understands both law and humanity, someone who knows that different voices make us stronger." Before Anna could respond, he placed a folder on her desk. "The board votes next week. Your name will be on the ballot. Think about it." As James Sr. left her office, Anna opened her notebook one last time that day. Below her notes from the hearing, she wrote, "Day 26, sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest acts of kindness. And sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone who will come after you." The sun was setting over Chicago as Anna packed up to leave, casting long shadows through her office window. In just 1 month, she had gone from being mocked for her accent to potentially becoming the firm's first Latina managing partner. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. 3 months into their sensitivity training program, James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole sat nervously in Anna's office. The weekly progress reports from their counselors and community service supervisors lay spread across her desk. "So," Anna said, reviewing their files, "tell me what you've learned at the Immigrant Legal Aid Clinic." Victoria spoke first, her usual polish replaced by genuine emotion. "Yesterday, I helped a woman from Guatemala prepare for her citizenship interview. She reminded me so much of my mother, the same determination, the same worry about her accent. I used to be ashamed of my mom's accent, but now—" She paused, wiping away a tear. "Now I'm ashamed I was ever ashamed." James nodded, looking different from the arrogant lawyer he'd been 3 months ago. "We had a client from Nigeria last week. Brilliant man, a doctor in his country. But here, he's struggling to get his medical license because people keep dismissing him over his accent. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing myself as I used to be." Anna made notes in her familiar notebook, but these weren't recordings of discrimination anymore. These were signs of progress, of change happening one person at a time. The door opened, and Sarah from HR entered with exciting news. "The diversity training program you designed is being adopted by 3 other major law firms in Chicago," she announced. "They want you to help implement it, Anna." The transformation at Preston and Williams had caught the attention of the legal community. Under Anna's guidance, the firm had established a mentorship program for immigrant lawyers, launched a scholarship fund for minority law students, and created a comprehensive cultural competency training system. Later that day, Anna led a firm-wide meeting in the main conference room, the same room where she had once been mocked for her accent. Now, she stood at the head of the table as the newly elected managing partner, the first Latina to hold this position in the firm's history. Our international client base has grown by 40% in the last 3 months, she announced to the assembled staff. Clients aren't just staying with us, they're referring others. They see what we're becoming. She clicked to the next slide, showing a new initiative, Voices of Excellence, a program celebrating linguistic and cultural diversity in the legal profession. The firm would provide free legal support to immigrant professionals facing discrimination. Maria Rodriguez raised her hand. What about the recordings? The ones of James and Victoria mocking accents. Should we delete them? Anna shook her head. No, with their permission, those recordings will be part of our training program. Sometimes we need to remember where we started to appreciate how far we've come. After the meeting, Anna had another surprise visitor, Carlos Martinez, who had flown in from Spain specifically to see the changes at the firm. Impressive, he said, looking around at the newly diverse office. Very impressive. But tell me, Anna, what happens when James and Victoria return? Will things go back to how they were? Anna led him to the pro bono department, where photos showed James and Victoria working at the Immigrant Legal Aid Clinic. In one picture, Victoria was helping a group of elderly immigrants prepare for their citizenship tests. In another, James was teaching English to newcomers. They're different people now, Anna explained. Sometimes, those who learn the hardest lessons become the strongest advocates for change. Carlos nodded approvingly. The other international clients and I have been talking. We want to establish a foundation, the International Legal Diversity Initiative. We'd like you to lead it. Before Anna could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A young lawyer was arguing with a security guard, who was trying to prevent a Spanish-speaking client from entering. They watched as Victoria, who was visiting the office to submit her progress report, stepped in. To everyone's surprise, she began speaking in carefully practiced Spanish, helping translate for the client. Her accent wasn't perfect, but her effort and sincerity were clear. 3 months ago, she was mocking accents, Carlos observed. Now she's learning Spanish. Anna smiled, remembering her own words from the disciplinary hearing. Sometimes the hardest punishment is having to face yourself and change. That evening, as Anna updated her notebook one last time, she wrote, Day 90. Today I saw Victoria Cole speaking Spanish with a client. Her accent was thick, her grammar unsure. But she tried, and in that attempt was all the difference in the world. Sometimes victory isn't in proving others wrong, it's in helping them find the courage to change. The Chicago sunset painted the sky orange as Anna closed her notebook. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had shown her that real change was possible, one voice, and one accent, at a time. 1 year had passed since Anna's first day at Preston and Williams. The firm's lobby now displayed a large banner reading International Legal Excellence Through Diversity in multiple languages. As Anna walked through the entrance, she remembered how nervous she had been that first morning. Today was special. James Preston Jr. and Victoria Cole were returning to work after completing their 6-month sensitivity program, followed by 6 months of supervised community service. The entire firm gathered in the conference room for their official return. Victoria stepped up to the podium first. Gone was the arrogant lawyer who had once mocked accents. In her place stood someone new, someone humbled by experience. A year ago, I thought success meant fitting into a certain mold, Victoria said, her voice steady. I mocked what was different because I was afraid of being different myself. Today, I'm proud to announce that our immigrant legal aid program has helped over 200 families. And yes, she smiled, I still stumble over my Spanish pronunciations, but now I'm not afraid to try. James spoke next, looking at his father in the audience. Dad always taught me that a good lawyer fights for justice, but I forgot that justice includes treating everyone with dignity. Ms. Hernandez didn't just teach me that lesson, she lived it. When she could have destroyed our careers, she chose to help us become better people instead. Anna watched from her managing partner's seat as they presented their year-long journey. The recordings of their past mockery played one final time, not to shame them, but to show how far they had come. Richard Williams stood up next. Preston and Williams has changed, he announced. Our international client base has doubled. We become the go-to firm for cross-cultural legal work, and today we're launching something new. He unveiled the plaque, the Hernandez Scholarship for Immigrant Legal Professionals. Anna hadn't known about this. She felt tears forming in her eyes as Richard continued. This scholarship will help immigrant lawyers and legal professionals advance their careers without facing the discrimination Anna once faced here. And our first advisory board members will be Victoria Cole and James Preston Jr., working under Anna's leadership. The room burst into applause. Maria Rodriguez, now head of the Diversity Committee, handed out brochures for their new mentorship program. The firm's letterhead had been redesigned to include all the languages they now served. Later that afternoon, Anna received an unexpected group of visitors, law students from various immigrant backgrounds. They had heard about Preston and William's transformation and wanted to learn more. "Were you scared?" one student asked. "When you decided to stand up to the discrimination?" Anna thought carefully before answering. "Being scared is normal, but staying silent is a choice. I chose to speak up, not just for myself, but for everyone who would come after me." Victoria, who was passing by, stopped to join the conversation. To everyone's surprise, she shared her own mother's immigrant story, something she had hidden for years. The students listened intently as she described her journey from shame to pride. As the day drew to a close, Anna found a small package on her desk. Inside was her old notebook, the one where she had documented every incident of discrimination. James and Victoria had added their own notes to it, tracking their year of learning and change. On the last page they had written, "Thank you for showing us that an accent is not a barrier. It's a bridge to understanding other cultures. We were wrong, and you made us right." Carlos Martinez called from Spain for their regular update. "Anna," he said, "the International Legal Diversity Initiative has received funding from law firms across Europe. They'd all want to follow the Preston and Williams model. You've started something bigger than you imagined." Anna looked out her office window at the Chicago skyline, remembering her father's words. Better to build new foundations than to regret not trying. She had built something new indeed, not just a more inclusive law firm, but a model for change that others could follow. James and Victoria's transformation proved that people could grow beyond their prejudices when given the chance. As she prepared to leave for the day, Anna passed the firm's new mission statement, displayed prominently in the lobby. "Justice speaks in every accent." She smiled, thinking of how a story that began with mockery had ended with understanding. Her accent, once a target of ridicule, had become a symbol of the firm's strength. And somewhere out there, another immigrant professional was gathering the courage to speak up, knowing that change was possible. The sun set on Chicago as Anna closed her office door, her voice, accent and all, now one of the most respected in international law. She had not just survived, she had transformed an entire institution, proving that sometimes the greatest victory is not in defeating others, but in helping them become better versions of themselves. The end.